Hello, this is Mark Wildman of Wildman Athletica, and today we are going to answer some questions about program design. This is going to be an extremely nerdy video. If you are not into the nerdiness of program design, this question comes to us from Ben Semish, and he had a comment on a video we put up about 2 weeks ago, which was about program design. We made a program design video about combining kettlebells with CrossFit box equipment. So what we had in that program was a warm-up, which was a 12-minute warm-up that we've put out through Strong and Fit, which was our joint mobility program, Strong and Fit joint mobility program, 12 minutes, 6 days a week, focusing on the neck, the shoulders, the spine, and the hips, because if those things work and are warmed up properly, then everything else in training works. The second thing in that program was Turkish get up, time under tension, building towards 10 minutes, and then a long cycle block, single arm kettlebell long cycle, which could be replaced with single arm kettlebell clean and press if that was the nerd math that you were doing at the time. And then we had a sexy block of training, which was 30 minutes long. Sexy block means the goal of the block of training is to make yourself more attractive conventionally, not to make yourself perform better or anything else. The goal is to look better. That was a floor bench press, because that is a safe thing to do with no spotter in a gym. An incline dumbbell press, because incline presses don't really exist in Turkish get-ups or clean and press, so you would be stressing the muscles at an angle not covered normally by kettlebells, and an ab exercise. Those three exercises together took about 90 seconds. You had a 90-second break. Each round was 3 minutes long. There were 10 total rounds. That block of training was 30 minutes long. Ben wanted to know what he could replace this sexy block with if his goals were different. If he did not care about being more attractive, which I applaud him for, I don't really care about being more attractive, and he wanted to focus on longevity and athleticism instead. Excellent idea. We normally put sexy blocks of training in for people who get paid to look better. I started this idea when I was working in the movie business and traveling overseas. We organized our training in a specific way. We warmed up every morning because we were working out at super early times, and we needed to make sure that you were warming up, turning on all the neurological parts of the system, the neck, the shoulders, the hip, the spine, the important big parts. And you also use that as a recovery or a check-in from the previous day. When working in movies, people tend to get hit, slammed into walls, do jerk vests, get run over by cars, get hit with swords, fall off of, crash through tables, all kinds of fun stuff. So that was a warm up for the day and a check-in from the previous day to see if anything was trashed. Then order of importance, Turkish get up, small block of time, heavy weight. If you only got these two things in, you would still have done a good workout for the day. Then an endurance block of training. I was doing long cycle for 20 minutes, working on just breathing, as you might hear it called from Everyday Athlete in Scotland, or clean and press if you needed to be more attractive. Think of the long cycle as medium speed running, and think of clean and press more as a 400-meter sprint. Clean and press times are 2.5 minutes at the high end for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 reverse ladders. 4, 3, 2, 1 would be 2 minutes, which is your 400-ish time, just general, super rough. And 3, 2, 1 is even lower than that. You're down in the 90-second, sub 90-second times. So clean and press is an endurance weightlifting idea, building you up to greater time under tension with all abs, all legs, and heavy weights, creating as much tension as possible. So these ideas here build up in importance. The sexy block of training is there for people who get paid to be prettier. If you don't care about that, awesome. I don't care about it much either. Let's talk about what you could replace the sexy block of training with for 30 minutes with the goal of longevity and athleticism. When I think about longevity training, we think about that in the context of joint mobility, making sure all of your joints move in all the directions that they should move every day. If one of your joints stops moving, it will eventually cause another joint to stop moving, and it will cascade, and eventually you will become old by having old characteristics. Rounded shoulders, joints don't move, flexed knees, forward arching head. So longevity should be focused on posture and joint movement. I tend to use ideas 4 how to do that from Asian internal martial arts. This gets really nerdy. Tai Chi, specifically Chen Tai Chi, Bagua, and Jingyi. I know the most about Jingyi, and it is very similar to some things that we are going to talk about down here. Athleticism. We're going to use 2 major ideas to define athleticism moving forward. We're going to use a CrossFit idea, which I think is really good, which is a pretty old CrossFit idea. Cardio and respiratory endurance, stamina, strength, flexibility, power, speed, coordination or coordinated skill, agility, balance, and accuracy. And then we're going to use another idea to also help us define athleticism, an idea from the system physical natural, the natural method naturale. It is from a researcher from the late 1800s who was French named George Herbert, I believe his name was. He was born in like 1875. He traveled the world and he looked at what people who lived outside of cities in more primitive for that time setting. People who lived in European cities he found were not so healthy and were not so capable, and he traveled around the world and he looked at more primitive is in air quotes because that's how they thought of it back then, not because it's actually true. But he came up with 10 actions that people should do every day: walk, run, quadruped move, or crawling on the hands and the knees or hands and the feet, climbing, jumping, balancing, lifting and carrying, lifting, carrying, lifting, carrying, lifting, carrying, throwing, defense, and swimming. If we take the ideas of longevity and athleticism and we combine them all together, we're going to get some things that we can do very simply and easily for low equipment cost, low space cost, and an infinite amount of stuff to do that would replace this sexy block of training. 1, Mace Flow. Mace Flow can kind of be broken up into a couple of different ideas. When you think of Mace Flow, think of taking a mace and spinning it around in a bunch of different ways for a set period of time. In this case, 30 minutes. There are several ways to think about doing this. I usually talk about the beginning, the Wildman videos or whatever. We have about 100 videos teaching people the basics of moving mace. A simple way to put 30 minutes of Mace Flow prep into a program would be to start with one exercise, do it for a minute with the left hand, do it with a minute for the right hand, add 1 step of complexity, and move forward. Build for 30 minutes. That would give you 15 steps of complexity because you have left for a minute, right for a minute. That would give you 2 minutes. You would do that 15 times and evolve it upwards. It would become different every day, and that would meet all the requirements of longevity training because you would move your body in all the ways that it naturally moves. If you start to step, then you have agility training in there. You have cardio. You have to breathe every time the mace moves, every time your rib cage opens and closes. You have stamina. You have to hold on to the weight for that long. You have strength. Leverage strength in particular, core strength, massively leg strength depending on how big your steps are. Flexibility, all the versions of flexibility that you need in your stepping pattern. Power, anytime you have strength plus speed, you get power. Pure speed. Coordination, don't hit yourself in the face, learn to catch the weight. Hand release drills, agility, stepping patterns, balance, stepping patterns, and accuracy. Don't hit yourself in the face. Mace Flow meets all of the requirements here, and it meets a bunch of the requirements over here. It meets the requirement of balance. It meets a requirement of lifting and carrying, even though it's a lever. Think of it like carrying an axe. It meets all the requirements of throwing patterns. Mace Flow, every time you do it, builds different patterns. All of Mace Flow patterns build into throwing patterns. It also tends to cover defense because most of the movements you use are the core movements of all defensive arts. Another way to think about Mace Flow that is 1 step up from the way that I tend to teach it would be Steel Mace Vinyasa, as is taught by Summer Huntington of the FlowShala, and she takes it a different way. I do an evolution every time, which is different. She organizes programs around different things: closed hip mobility, open hip mobility, core endurance, arm endurance, etc. I think she has 6 different major ideas that she puts it into. And then the full idea, the true flow idea, would be Steel Mace Flow. Examples of that would be Mace Pick from Texas and Jared Michael Thomas. Jared Thomas? Jared Thomas from Tennessee down in Nashville. If you want to look those two guys up on Instagram, they are my favorite version of pure steel Mace Flow. Mace Flow is picking up the mace and creating different types of movements based on a bunch of core ideas and doing it for a set period of time. That would be an excellent replacement for this sexy block of training. It would meet all the requirements of the movements for longevity, and it would meet almost everything about athleticism, specifically on this list and a bunch of them on this list. Another idea that you could do is kettlebell flow. Same idea as you do with Mace Flow. You're going to be moving with a kettlebell, building on top of your core fundamental movements and developing different movement patterns every day. And this would be essentially an idea. You would go outside where if you drop the kettlebell, it's not going to destroy anything. And you would work for 30 minutes and try to not put the weight down unless you dropped it, in which case, get out of the way. The other idea is animal flow, taking the fundamental ideas of quadruped movement and expanding them into a bunch of different ways. There are a whole different series of ideas within animal flow. We have not talked about that yet on this channel, but we probably should. We should talk about that. When we think about picking one of these three things, we would like to balance it with the other aspects of the program that previously existed. He just wanted to get rid of this. The warm-up should stay because that's the check-in. If your spine works, your shoulder works, your neck works, and your hips work, kind of everything will work better. So check in on that every day. Turkish get-up. Getting up off the ground is a fundamental human skill. It's not on this list, but it's on my list. Getting up off the ground in whatever way. Getting up off the ground with a heavy weight is a very good idea, and it is a lot of work done in a small period of time, so we make that the second most important thing. And then here, think of this as an intermediate weight. Think heavy, think intermediate, think light. Long cycle, it has to be a medium weight in order for you to do it for a long period of time. If it's clean and press, it's probably still medium weight for most people because you're building up to 5 reps of clean and press and doing it as a reverse ladder. If you can do a rep for 5 reps, then you're probably down in your 60-70% of your weight. So that would also be an intermediate to light weight. And then think about Mace Flow or kettlebell flow as being light compared to that. If you were to do a Turkish get up with a 32K, that would be heavy, clean and press with 24K. And then your kettlebell flow idea could be 16K, and you'd be using the 3 classic weights. If you tried to do kettlebell flow with the same weight that you could do Turkish get up with or clean and press with, then neither of these is heavy enough yet. Mace Flow is probably going to be light. Think for the ladies in the 7 to 10 pound range for the most part. For men in the 10 to 15 pound range for the most part. There are some extremely strong people like Jared Thomas and Mace Pick who can Mace Flow with heavier weights up into the 25 pound range. But you'll notice when the weights get heavier, the movements get simpler and you lose some of the stepping patterns of agility that you get with the lighter weights. So Ben, I hope we have answered your question in a super nerdy way. What can you replace the sexy block with? Mace Flow, kettlebell flow, animal flow. You could also replace it with running or cycling, but they will meet less of the requirements of longevity and athleticism. This definition of athleticism comes to us from CrossFit, 10 things. This version of athletic program design comes to us from George Herbert from the late 1800s. When I think about athleticism, I think about these 2 things. I also have one more category we should probably talk about sometime in another video, but we'll make that another video. And then longevity training. Think about joint mobility, moving every joint in your body in every direction with intermediate to lightweight and increasingly complex movement patterns forever. That's kind of the cheap, short version of longevity ideas. There are other more advanced ideas that we can talk about. In Jingyi, the martial art, there are 5 core families of movements based on elements. Those elements correspond to organs, and then they combine together to create 12 different types of animal-based movement. There's some deep, nerdy ideas in here, and we can talk about all of them if people want, because this could really just be a series of 50 videos talking about longevity and athleticism, and then we could make another 50 videos about sexy training. When you guys send me questions, it is good because it trips us into these much more complex ideas. Short answer, do Mace Flow to replace it. Why we would pick Mace Flow or kettlebell flow or animal flow is always a good question to think about, because we need to know more about program design, because being healthy is everybody's personal responsibility. And the more you can think about it and categorize those ideas into some type of engineering equation that you can solve on your own, the better, the world gets, I guess. If everybody was healthy and felt good and was creative all the time, I think the world would be a better place.